In 1912, the world watched in awe as a ship set sail, promising to rewrite the history of navigation. The Titanic was more than a vessel. It was the pride of an era. Called unsinkable, it brought together the most modern, luxurious, and grand elements of its time. On board were millionaires, immigrants, entire families, all with dreams, fears, and futures about to meet their fate. But no one imagined that this would be the first and last voyage of the Titanic. In the early hours of April 15th, the impossible happened. An iceberg, a miscalculation, and in less than 3 hours, the ship that defied the gods lay at the bottom of the ocean. Of the more than 2,000 people on board, over half lost their lives. Some vanished forever. Others, as if by some strange twist of fate, left fragments of themselves scattered among the wreckage. Among those fragments there was something different. A piece of paper. Simple, time-stained, yet still readable. It was a letter. A message written calmly, in the comfort of a first-class cabin, by a man who didn't know he would be dead the very next day. The letter survived. The author did not. And that's what made it so powerful. Not because it held great revelations, but precisely because it was ordinary. That's where the impact lies, in the simple words of someone who was alive, fully alive, just hours before the tragedy. This is the story of Alexander Oscar Holverson, an ordinary man who became eternal not for his deeds, but for unknowingly leaving behind one of the final heartbeats of the Titanic, and perhaps of humanity in the face of the unexpected. Alexander Oscar Holverson likely never imagined his name would be remembered over a century later, let alone because of a letter. He wasn't a celebrity of the time, nor an industrial tycoon. He was an ordinary man, upper middle class, with a life built on effort and dignity. An American and a salesman by trade, he had spent the last few months traveling with his wife through South America. They were in the Andes, resting, discovering new places. And now they were heading home aboard the largest ship ever built, the Titanic. Holverson boarded as a first-class passenger, an expensive privilege, earned through years of work and stability. Yet despite the luxury around him, he didn't seem dazzled. His letter shows he was an attentive, sensitive, and observant man. He wrote with care, almost with sweetness, to the mother waiting for him in New York. It was an ordinary letter, yes, but between the lines was an intimate portrait of someone who, even amid the comforts of elite travel, thought about family, a simple life, the things that truly matter. What's most striking is that, at that moment, Alexander had no idea he was leaving behind his final words. There was no tone of farewell, no hint of tragedy, just the calm flow of an ordinary thought, carried by the sound of waves and the elegant glide of the Titanic across the Atlantic. And that's exactly what makes this letter so powerful. It holds the purity of the moment before the end. It was April 13th, 1912. The Titanic sailed under clear skies and calm seas. For the passengers, it felt like being inside a floating dream, the largest and most luxurious ship ever built, with golden halls, fine dining, and the promise that nothing could go wrong. It was in this setting of peace and wonder that Alexander Holverson sat down to write to his mother. On board, he described the ship as grand as the finest hotels, and wrote with enthusiasm about the food and services he was enjoying. He casually mentioned the presence of John Jacob Astor, the richest man on the ship, as if describing any neighbor. "Mr. Astor is here. He looks like a very ordinary man," he wrote. There's something deeply human in that line, the contrast between the grandeur of the journey and the simplicity in the eyes of the observer. Holverson wasn't dazzled by the glamour. He was simply present, living the moment, and wanting to share it with the person who mattered most, his mother. That letter, handwritten on Titanic stationery, was a quiet window opened before the storm. His words weren't prophetic, but they carry a sweetness that, in light of what would happen just hours later, becomes almost unbearably moving. It's the kind of text that, when read today, seems to whisper from the depths of time. We're fine. We're still here. There is still peace. For now. In the early hours of April 15, 1912, what had seemed like the voyage of dreams became one of the most tragic disasters in modern history. At 11:40 p.m., the Titanic struck an iceberg in the middle of the North Atlantic. The ship, once hailed as unsinkable, began to go down slowly, revealing that not even the world's greatest engineering could hold back the forces of nature. In less than 3 hours, the steel giant vanished beneath the icy waters, taking over 1,500 lives with it. As chaos spread through the halls and decks, there is no record of where exactly Alexander Oscar Holverson was, but we know his fate. He died that night. His wife, Mary Alice, survived, likely rescued on one of the few lifeboats available. It's impossible to read the letter Alexander wrote the day before and not feel the abyss between the calm of his words and the horror that followed. His text mentioned no fear, no danger, only comfort, admiration, and affection. The brutal contrast is what makes this letter so powerful. In just a few hours, everything changed, and he never had the chance to write anything else. Days after the sinking, recovery teams began to find the bodies of passengers who hadn't been completely claimed by the sea. Among them was Alexander Oscar Holverson. In his pockets, carefully folded, was the letter he had written to his mother. Intact, despite the water, the cold, and time. A simple piece of paper, yet full of humanity, hope, and love. That letter, which survived the greatest maritime disaster of its time, became a relic of emotion that no photograph could ever capture. Over a century later, in 2017, the letter was auctioned for over 126,000 British pounds. Such was its historical and emotional significance. It is one of the few pieces of correspondence recovered directly from a Titanic victim's body and still bears visible marks of water and time. Today, it's considered one of the most touching documents related to the sinking, reminding us that amid the scale of disaster, there were personal stories, and that sometimes eternity fits into a single page written with love. Alexander Oscar Holverson's letter, simple in its writing but profound in its content, became a symbol of the fragility of human life. The Titanic, which seemed indestructible, sank into the cold waters of the Atlantic, taking over 1,500 lives with it. Yet, as the bodies were lost to the depths, his words withstood time and disaster, floating out of the chaos, carrying with them a piece of humanity that could never be erased. In an era when communication was a privilege, the letter became the last connection Alexander had with his mother, an attempt to maintain the bond even in the face of death's imminence. His words, simple and affectionate, speak of an ordinary man who never imagined his final message would transcend time, touching not only his mother, but all of us. "I'm having an excellent trip. The Titanic is simply grand." These words became a window into the moment before the disaster. What seemed like an ordinary letter turned into a silent cry for survival, hope, and love. And so, the fragility of life blends with the power of the written word. How something so simple and fleeting, a letter, can endure beyond death, reminding us that life is made up of moments, some simple, but so intense that they are never forgotten. Alexander, the ordinary man, became eternal through his words. The letter is not just a piece of paper. It is a testament to human connection, which goes beyond tragedy and endures through time, reminding us that, no matter how death may erase many of our steps, the word remains eternal. Thus, Alexander Oscar Holverson's final letter becomes more than just a document. It is a symbol of how words can survive the impossible, crossing time and space, touching those left behind, and sparking deep reflection on the value of life, memory, and human communication. On a ship destined to be immortal, the words of an ordinary man became eternal. The Titanic sank, but the letter, this personal, simple, and loving message, was what survived, echoing through time, touching all who read it, and reminding us that sometimes it's what we say in the most unexpected moments that has the power to transcend. If this story touched your heart, share this video with someone you love. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the Cartas Perdidas channel. Here, every letter reveals not only a story from the past, but also a piece of the human soul that never disappears. Now tell me, which historical letter do you believe has the power to change destinies? Comment below and continue exploring the lost stories through letters that shaped history. Until the next video.